In the week ending March 30th, 2026, the national average price for diesel fuel reached $5.37 per gallon. For the trucking industry, that number had direct consequences. At 6.5 miles per gallon, a long-haul driver burning diesel at that price was spending 82 cents per mile on fuel alone, compared to 56 cents 3 months earlier. On a 1,000-mile run, that translated to an additional $266 in fuel costs per load, absorbed entirely by spot market carriers, who had no automatic surcharge mechanism to fall back on. Dean Croak, an analyst at DAT, said it plainly at a freight industry conference that week: small carriers on the spot market are getting dumped on. Two things produced that price. One was on the front page of every newspaper in the country. The other received almost no coverage. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated airstrikes on Iran, targeting military facilities, nuclear sites, and leadership. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed. By March 4th, Iran had declared the Strait of Hormuz closed and begun attacking ships attempting to transit. In the first week of March, diesel jumped 96 cents per gallon, described by FreightWaves as the largest one-week increase since the federal government began tracking the series. That was the war. That was the story everyone covered. Then, on the evening of March 23rd, at approximately 6:25 in the evening, a unit at the Valero Refinery in Port Arthur, Texas, caught fire. The explosion was felt 11 miles from the plant. Students in Sabine Pass had to be ferried home by boat because road closures blocked their buses. Jefferson County shut down State Highways 82 and 87. A 12-hour shelter-in-place order covered a zone extending more than 2 miles from the refinery. The Port Arthur Fire Department, Beaumont Fire Department, and Jefferson County Sheriff's Office worked through the night. The fire was declared under control by 3:30 the following morning. Port Arthur Mayor Charlotte Moses posted to Facebook that night, "There's been an explosion, yes, but we're okay. Everybody's okay." She was right about the casualties. There were none. What a Facebook post could not address was what had happened to the facility itself. The destroyed unit was the diesel hydrotreater, Unit 243, a 47,000-barrel-per-day unit that produces clean, low-sulfur diesel. Not damaged. The unit and its control room were destroyed. According to filings with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, an unforeseeable release of process fluid in that unit ignited, triggering multiple process upsets across the refinery, involving the crude distillation unit, the fluid catalytic cracker, the hydrocracker, and the hydrofluoric alkylation unit. Valero's statement the following morning read, "As always, the safety of our workers is our top priority. The diesel hydrotreater went unmentioned. The emissions event that followed lasted not hours, but 244 hours and 35 minutes, more than 10 days, from the night of March 23rd to April 2nd. More than 157,000 pounds of chemicals were released into the air from 28 different emission points: sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, volatile organic compounds, toluene, xylene. According to EPA records, 2,767 people live within 1 mile of that refinery. 71% of them are people of color. 37% are low income. 976 of them are children. Environmental health advocate Tejeda told a local television station in early April, "If this was some sort of a fault, if this was an oversight, to really hold that facility accountable to operating in a safe way, our ability to do that is severely compromised because we are lacking the basic information we need about what happened and what the impacts were." As of this writing, the cause of the March 23rd explosion remains officially undetermined. When news of the fire broke, wholesale diesel futures jumped 16 cents. On a market already under extreme pressure from the Hormuz closure, That accelerated the price surge already underway. The national average reached $5.37 per gallon by the end of March. California crossed $6. This was not the first time a cluster of compounding events turned a single supply shock into a prolonged national fuel crisis. In August 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall near Burris Triumph, Louisiana, as a Category 3 storm, and within 24 hours had shut in 95% of Gulf of Mexico oil production and 88% of Gulf natural gas production. The geography, the dynamics, and the timeline of what followed offer a concrete measure of how long these situations actually take to resolve. Before Katrina, the Gulf Coast was not simply an important part of U.S. fuel supply, it was the dominant part. Gulf Coast refineries produced roughly half of all gasoline consumed in the United States. The Louisiana offshore oil port handled approximately 11% of all U.S. oil consumption. Port Fourchon, Louisiana, serviced approximately 16% of the nation's crude oil and natural gas supply. When Katrina hit, approximately 1.9 to 2 million barrels per day of crude oil refining capacity went offline immediately. The storm destroyed 47 oil platforms and 4 drilling rigs outright, and extensively damaged 20 more platforms and 9 more rigs. Shell's Mars platform, producing approximately 147,000 barrels per day on its own, was severely damaged. Refineries at Chalmette, Belchasse, Merose, and Pascagoula, running from 125,000 to 325,000 barrels per day, shut down. Less than 4 weeks later, Hurricane Rita made landfall on the Texas coast. An additional 4.8 million barrels per day of refining capacity in Texas and nearby Louisiana shut down. Rita shut in 100% of Gulf oil production. By early October 2005, approximately 94% of oil production and 75% of natural gas production in the Gulf of Mexico remained shut in. Port Arthur, Texas, the same Port Arthur where Valero's refinery caught fire in March 2026, had 3 major refineries in Rita's path. Shell's Motiva facility at 285,000 barrels per day, total at 234,000, and Valero itself at 255,000. Between August 29th and September 5th, the national average for regular gasoline rose 46 cents to $3.07 per gallon, described at the time as the largest weekly price increase on record. In some markets, it was worse. Gasoline reached $4 in parts of the country. In Stockbridge, Georgia, one station briefly sold regular at $5.87. These were outliers, but they showed what happens when the system reaches its limits. The federal government moved quickly. By August 31st, Energy Secretary Samuel Bodman had authorized Strategic Petroleum Reserve crude oil loans, and 7 refiners requested more than 13 million barrels. On September 2nd, President Bush formally declared a severe energy supply interruption. The International Energy Agency coordinated a 60 million barrel release across 28 member nations. The EPA issued emergency waivers on fuel blend standards. Bush temporarily waived the Jones Act to allow foreign flag tankers to carry oil between American ports. The IRS allowed dyed diesel, normally restricted to off-road use, on public roads. Despite all of that, by the peak in early October, following Rita's second blow, gasoline had spiked to $2.94 per gallon. Adjusted for inflation, that figure is in the same range as today's prices. Recovery was measured in months, not weeks. Gulf oil production was back to 42% of normal by September 7th, roughly 1 week after landfall. 7 of 9 key Louisiana refineries, capable of refining up to 1.5 million barrels per day, were operational by November 2005. But ConocoPhillips' Belchas refinery, running 247,000 barrels per day, did not return to normal operations until April 2006, 7 months after the storm. The national retail gasoline price returned to pre-Katrina levels by approximately October 26th, about 2 months out. A year after Katrina, Gulf oil production was still cumulatively down more than 166 million barrels from the storm-era disruption, with output still running approximately 30% below pre-storm annual levels. Dan Laufenberg, chief economist at Ameriprise Financial, offered an assessment 1 year later. The U.S. economy rebounded from Katrina, although the region hit by the storm has not, demonstrating once again how amazingly resilient our economy can be. The structural parallel between 2005 and 2026 is direct. In both cases, a major headline event, a hurricane in one instance and a war in the other, struck a system already running tight and produced a rapid, severe fuel price spike. In both cases, the compounding factors carried the greater weight. Katrina was followed by Rita. The Hormuz closure was followed by the Valero fire. In both cases, refinery damage in Port Arthur received less public attention than the headline event, even though it was the mechanism through which the supply shock translated into prices at the pump. And in both cases, the government reached for emergency reserves and regulatory waivers, imperfect tools deployed under time pressure. The comparison has limits, and those limits matter. The 2026 Hormuz crisis disrupted approximately 20% of all global oil trade. The International Energy Agency characterized it as the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Katrina, catastrophic as it was, disrupted a major portion of U.S. domestic supply, not global supply at that scale. These are different orders of magnitude. The IEA released 400 million barrels in coordination with member nations in 2026, more than 6 times the volume released in response to Katrina. The scope of 2026 is not comparable to 2005 in any direction that flatters the present situation. There is also a fundamental difference in what drives recovery. After Katrina, the path back was clear even when it was slow. Rebuild the infrastructure, restart the refineries, and prices would normalize. The timeline was bounded by engineering and logistics. After the Hormuz closure, the path back ran through diplomacy, through governments and militaries and negotiators, and the political calculations of multiple countries. That is a different kind of uncertainty. On April 7th, 2026, the Trump administration announced a 2-week ceasefire brokered by Pakistan. On April 13th, U.S. forces began a blockade of Iranian ports that lasted through late May. On June 17th, Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian signed a memorandum of understanding at the Palace of Versailles. The following day, Pakistan announced that the memorandum implied Iran would promptly reopen the strait. Shipping traffic through the strait remains far below pre-war levels as of mid-June. The WTO recorded a 95% reduction in crude oil ships and a 99% reduction in LNG ships through the Persian Gulf since the conflict began. Those numbers do not reverse overnight because a memorandum was signed. As for the Valero Port Arthur refinery, most units were expected to be, in COO Gary Simmons' words on the first quarter earnings call, fairly normalized by approximately May 1st. The coker, hydrocrackers, reformer, and a distillate hydrotreater were back online. The diesel hydrotreater, the unit that was destroyed, still has no confirmed rebuild timeline. Valero said it would update capital investment guidance once it determined the cost and schedule. That update has not yet been made public. What the 2005 parallel actually suggests about 2026 is this: the national price number recovers faster than the infrastructure does, and the infrastructure recovers faster than the community beneath it. In 2005, gasoline prices normalized within 2 months. Belchast did not come back for 7 months. A year later, Gulf production was still running 30% below its pre-storm baseline. The number at the pump can look normal, while the underlying system is still wounded. 2,767 people live within 1 mile of the Valero Port Arthur refinery. The cause of the March 23rd explosion is still officially unresolved. The diesel hydrotreater has no rebuild date. The war that pushed diesel above $5 has a signed memorandum, but not an open strait. And when you consider who bears the cost while the system heals, it is the spot market carrier absorbing $266 extra per load, the low-income resident who breathed what came out of 28 emission points over 10 days, and the community that, as 2005 demonstrated, is still there long after the headline price returns to normal.